he noticed that you turned blue. He immediately started chest compressions and he was able to call 911 and they were able to get you back. They had to shock you a couple times. What I think is something that's not talked about enough in the literature, which is the potential danger of some of these over-the-counter things that we use for sleep.
I am a chronic alcoholic. Like, I will drink until I am blacked out. And that day was no different. After being at a friend's, drinking like probably a whole bottle of vodka with him, went over to my dad's, drank some Fireball, had a margarita with him, then mixed in the Kratom. And I think that's what really set it off. It was a horrible storm. Really take a second look at yourself and try to reach out and get help. Because I was never willing to reach out and get help. I always told myself, like, no, I don't need rehab or AAA. I just wouldn't do it. See how it's affecting your life. Because after I stopped drinking, my anxiety, my depression went away.
Hello and welcome to Sleep is My Waking Passion, the podcast where we get real about sleep and how it shapes your life. I'm Dr. Alison Kole, a triple-boarded pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine physician who's learned to thrive despite having chronic insomnia. And now I'm here to help you do the same.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sleep is My Waking Passion podcast. You know who I am, and I have a very special guest today.
Do you know what that?
I want to introduce you to Xavier Schumann. Yes, he's named after an X-Man. I happen to know his father personally. His dad and I worked together for about a year and a half, and I simply adore his dad. And I heard about your story, Xavier, honestly, because your dad was texting me concerned about what had happened. This was like right before, basically, I was talking to him and I was like, go wake him up. So what we're going to be sharing with you today is what I think is something that's not talked about enough in the literature, which is the potential danger of some of these over-the-counter things that we use for sleep. So what I wanted to start with, Xavier, is would you mind introducing yourself? How old are you? Where are you living these days?
My name's Xavier Schumann, and I'm 25, turning 26 in like 10 days, not even. So that's kind of great. I'm from Portland, Oregon, born here, raised in Colorado, moved back to Portland. I much prefer Portland. Colorado sucks.
Really?
It's the weather. It's freezing in the winter, really hot in the summer. It's just so miserable.
Okay, not your scene. That's what I'm getting from you. Were you the one who got married?
Yeah, actually, I think it was October 12th.
Yes, I remember Cannon was talking about that. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your nuptials. And I'm really glad that you're here, that we can have this conversation. So can you tell everyone a little bit about what you do for a living these days?
Well, I just work in security. I'm actually going to school for welding. I actually just got accepted into PCC's welding shop classes up in Scappoose. So I'm kind of excited to get that rolling, get the ball going in my life, because I was kind of stagnant there for a while. But security mainly right now, and then I'm going to move off to welding here soon in about a year.
Well, so for your security job, by the way, welding is a great profession. Yeah. It's a very good skill set, and it is actually really necessary. So it's a smart thing to go into. With the security job that you have, do you work shifts? Is it, like what kind of hours do you have to work?
I work the night shift. I work in 10 to 6 a.m. So I work that
10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Monday through Friday. So it's
5 days a week.
Yeah, the night shift kind of sucks. My wife got a promotion to being manager. So I couldn't work my swing shift anymore because you can't work with each other. But I'm happy that she got the promotion, so I can't be upset that I have to work the night shift now.
Is that how you met?
No, well, we did meet at work, but not this job. We actually met at Regal Cinemas when I was 16 when we met, and then we got together when I was 17, and then I'm pretty sure I proposed like 6-7 months after that. It was like pretty go.
Goodness, this is such a romantic story. That's so awesome. All right. So would you consider yourself more of an evening person or a morning person? Like, where do you kind of feel your best?
I am a night owl. I like being up during the late hours.
Okay.
I typically like playing video games at the late hours, but I can't anymore. But I'm awake either way, so it kind of works out. It doesn't bother me to work the graveyard shift.
Okay. So if you had to make your own schedule, what time would you find yourself actually going to sleep?
I would like to be in sleep by like 4 typically, but that can't happen with my job, sadly. But it's not too shabby though, I guess.
So when you get home from work, do you struggle ever to get to sleep, or
Yeah,
is it pretty
I'm
easy
laying
for
in
you
bed for like
Okay. One of the things that you lose when you're doing shift work is you're working these hours that are sort of off from everybody else. And then what ends up happening is, at the end of my day, now that I don't have to do shift work, I get a chance to unwind for a little bit, right? And then I can go to sleep. It kind of almost feels like that gets truncated because you've been at work for, 8 hours of your life, and then you're coming home, and then it's very difficult for most of us to probably be able to turn that off.
it's quite hard. I also walk home.
Okay, how far away are you? It's a long
I
walk,
think
or
it's 2.8 miles.
2.8? Wow. Okay, well, that's really healthy for you, but it probably takes you a bit of time to relax and unwind when you walk home that far.
About 45 minutes to an hour, sadly.
Wow. Are you comfortable kind of talking me through around the time that everything happened that landed you in the hospital? And for those of us who are listening going, what the heck are we going to talk about? We're going to be talking about Kratom. And I think it probably impacted what happened to you to a certain extent. That's my theory, at least. So that's why I wanted to really kind of chat with you, especially since I kind of saw it unfold firsthand. Were you struggling with your sleep around the time that all of this occurred? Your dad had just mentioned that you had been pulling a couple of double shifts and you were just super kind of tired and I think wanting to unwind.
Leading up to that day, I am a chronic alcoholic. Like I will drink until I am blacked out. And that day was no different. And I went over to my dad's house after being at a friend's, drinking like probably a whole bottle of vodka with him. Went over to my dad's, drank some Fireball, had a margarita with him, then mixed in the Kratom. And I think that's what really set it off. It was a horrible storm of like perfect accidents.
Okay. And was there anything else that you took in order to try to relax and get to sleep?
Other than alcohol and Kratom, I cannot remember. I honestly don't remember the night like at all.
Has this been something that people were kind of aware of? Are you now in recovery from all of this?
Yeah, after the incident, I completely stopped drinking. I haven't touched a lick of liquor since that day, so I'm completely sober, and I actually don't touch really anything anymore. I used to smoke pot a little bit, but that gives me anxiety now. Yeah, a whole lot of nothing.
Is this something that we're talking about? Is this something that, your dad had known about your drinking and everything? Or is this something that you kind of kept under wraps? Nobody kind of knew the extent of it?
I think the only one who really knew was my wife, because me and her were the ones drinking together. I think my dad knew that I probably was drinking a little too much, but I think he was kind of putting it in with, he's 20 something. Of course, he's going to be a little partying, but I think it went farther than partying. It was a serious problem.
I hadn't realized that. And that's really brave of you to share that on the show. So thank you, because I think people need to hear that it's not benign what we do. I have some more questions for you, but I just wanted to pause and kind of share the context now. So you've heard the background, everyone listening. And so what happened was Xavier's dad contacted me concerned because he had a tape of his son sleeping. So Xavier was sleeping, and what I witnessed as a sleep professional was concerning. I saw signs of gasping. It almost sounded at some point that you were almost like choking a little bit. These are symptoms of obstructive sleep apnea. But what was interesting about what I was watching was that intermixed with that, I almost thought I saw that it was almost as though your brain was forgetting to breathe. Like maybe I was seeing a mixed picture there. Of course, I'm just observing something. I don't have any data points other than a small little video clip. But what we know, even with people who are drinking excessively alcohol, if we look just at that, alcohol can definitely further relax your upper airway muscles and cause you to potentially have your airway close off. So one of the things that exacerbates or makes worse sleep apnea is definitely alcohol. And just a couple of drinks can do that. So, a whole bottle of vodka for sure could definitely contribute to that. One of the things that is not really well talked about is the addition of Kratom. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that as we kind of get into your story. For those of you listening, you may never have heard of Kratom. And to be honest with you, before your dad told me what the heck you took, I had to look at this all up. So this is all new to me too. but it's mitragynine. And what that essentially is it's a compound that sort of acts kind of like a morphine-like substance, okay? So it kind of binds to those same opioid receptors and it can act in that same way. What happens when we take opiates? Well, one of the dangers that we know about, just extrapolating from the, opiate epidemic that we've had in this country, is that people can actually stop breathing as a result of that. And that's really because there's a ventilatory control center in our brain, a respiratory control center in our brain that helps to regulate taking a breath or not. So aside from just the sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea symptoms that I was watching unfold, I think that explains in part why I really was like, is this a mixed picture? Do I see that there's times when he even seems to forget to breathe? And so that was sort of the one thing that I became quite concerned with when I was kind of observing you. Now, do you know how much kratom you were taking out of curiosity?
From what I was told, I was only told it was like half a pill.
Okay. Do you know what that means though? Like, what does that translate to?
I have no clue. I know what it was being taken as is like a high concentration pill. Like that's why I only took half. So I think my dad said it was like a 500 milligram pill. So probably like 250.
Okay. They talk about low doses, it's supposed to be stimulating, and higher doses. This is the research I did. Again, the problem with some of these things that you buy, right, if you go to the drugstore and getting them or what have you, is you kind of don't know what it really has, right? You think it has something, but it may not. It's not like it's going to the pharmacy and getting a prescription for it. Interesting. Okay. So it sounds like you basically passed out, and the rest is you woke up in the hospital. Is that what happened?
Yeah. My first memory in the hospital, other than waking up with the tube in my mouth and thinking I was being attacked by vampires and ripping the tube out, was like sitting around in a room with a bunch of windows and my family like laying around me. But I'm guessing that was all the drugs that I was on making me visually see that. Because apparently I was in a room with no windows and there was nowhere for my family to be laying down. I don't know. It was really weird waking up off of that many like drugs keeping you asleep.
Okay. When you say that many drugs, are you referring to the kratom and the alcohol, or was there something else mixed into that mix?
I was kept asleep for like, I believe, 5 days in the hospital.
You're referring to in the hospital when they have you on everything, and then you kind of came in basically, and you probably did have a high blood alcohol concentration from what you're telling me. And then you had this kratom on board, and then of course they're intubating you, and as you're waking up, there are sedative medications that we add on top of that. So when you're talking about those drugs, you're talking about the drugs they give you in the hospital to basically keep you calm when they're trying to get your breathing under control and everything.
Yeah. It's super crazy.
Do you know what that
So what I can tell you happened in between, and you may have heard a little bit in the snippet that I got from your dad, honestly, was he was concerned. I was concerned about your breathing, and I encouraged him to wake you up. I was like, just reposition him. I just didn't like it. Just your breathing was kind of scary, babe. That's what I'm going to tell you. It was scary. I'm not lying.
I've seen the video. It was horrifying.
Yeah, and he couldn't wake you up, and then he noticed that you turned blue. And so he immediately started chest compressions, and he was able to call 911, and they were essentially able to get you back. From my understanding, they had to shock you a couple times. Normally, when we shock people, it usually means that they've gone into an abnormal heart rhythm that's not sustainable with life. So ventricular tachycardia would be one of it, ventricular fibrillation, and we call that term a cardiac arrest. And when I tell you, I see you, and you're nothing short of a walking miracle. So I'm so glad that you have found it within yourself to kind of re-examine some of the behaviors you were doing and get a handle on your alcoholism, essentially. That is huge, because the survival rate for out-of-hospital cardiac arrests, even in the best of circumstances, can be negligible. It's bad. So you were a miracle. I just want you to know that from the medical perspective, as far as I'm concerned, you were a miracle.
Do you know
the place and the time that it happened, if it would have happened anywhere else, I would have not made it. I was so lucky that it happened at my dad's and that my dad was still awake and then he caught it. It was a happy, horrible accident. It was so insane. If I would have went home, I would have been in my bed alone. My wife was out on vacation. My wife would have come home to a body in the bed, and it would have been horrible.
Exactly. So you had mentioned coming out of that experience, and for listeners, just picture yourself. You're 1 minute you were passed out, you think you're sleeping. The next minute you're waking up and there's a tube in your throat, and I'm sure it's not fun being in the ICU. We do all sorts of things. We got you hooked up to stuff. There's beeping and all sorts of craziness. So I'm actually not surprised that you felt like you were being attacked by some vampires. So it sounds like it was sort of they kept you intubated. And from the limited information that I have, it sounds like as an ICU doctor, it would be highly appropriate, especially since they probably were getting you out of some withdrawal if this was sort of a habit of yours, kind of drinking a lot and then passing out. So sometimes it makes it a more difficult landing, if you will, when we do get you back and you are recovering from the scary incident. Do they say anything to you in terms of how your heart is doing now? And are there any long lasting effects of this situation that you were in, that you experienced, aside from just not really recalling what happened during that time?
I actually went and saw a cardiologist.
Do you know what that?
Like a month or so after I got out of the hospital, just to double check in with my heart. And they did an echo, and he said it all looks like a perfectly healthy heart, and that he's really surprised that there was no damage, like permanent damage done to it. And my heart's made a full recovery. So I'm super lucky.
Oh my goodness, what a miracle. What a miracle. One of the things that has been talked about is that kratom can actually impact some of the way that potassium and other types of things kind of transmit across the heart muscle. And so what ends up happening is with these medications, what ends up happening is kratom can actually cause something called a QT prolongation. It's just how the electrical conductivity in the heart occurs. And when that starts to widen, that can lead to things like abnormal heart rhythms, like the ventricular tachycardia that I had mentioned. And so you can get this situation where you get something called torsade de pointe. And it's a term that we use in medicine, and it has to do with what we see in the waveforms that we see when we're looking at the electrical conductivity of the heart. It can potentially be very bad, very, very dangerous. And this is why it would fit with the fact that you needed to be shocked. Did they say anything to you about any seizures or any sort of neurologic changes that occurred during that experience of which you're aware?
No, not at all, actually. Nothing that I can remember. It's all kind of a real big blur. Terrifying blur, but a blur.
Yeah. And the other thing that was noted too is that, especially with a lot of alcohol on board, is one of the things we know, and we've seen it with rock stars. How many rock stars have died from basically alcohol poisoning, right? I'm thinking Janis Joplin would be one. There's been a lot of people over the years. I'm thinking of rock and roll because that's the one that, those are the folks that kind of come to mind. One of the things that happens is they could pass out, but then they could literally have some vomiting episodes, and then they can aspirate. And one of the things that your dad shared with me is he thinks there was an aspiration that had occurred, meaning that whatever you had been consuming kind of went up and then went into the lungs. And that was another reason they had to make sure your lungs were healing better before they can get you off the ventilator.
They did bring that up, actually. The fluids went back down into my lungs. It happened twice when I ripped out the tube as well, when I was coming out of it. And it caused a tap to myself again. So then they had to put me back under for a couple days. And yeah, that sucked.
You sound good. That what you did was what we call a self-extubation. That's the term that we use in the intensive care unit. And that's you deciding you did not want that tube in anymore and you were going to get it out. And you know what? The same thing happened to my dad. Fortunately, you're 26 and he was in his 70s. So the outcome was different for him. But I'm so happy to just hear that you're here and willing to share your story. This is really... I think this is really meaningful for people to know. I'm telling you, I'm researching this. There's hardly any information. And I wanted to share with you that a friend of mine and colleague who's a neurologist, had actually seen central sleep apnea in one of his patients. So what had happened is this gentleman came to me, he was sort of using Kratom recreationally and was noted to have sort of a mixed picture of some, I believe, obstructive sleep apnea and central sleep apnea. And then the central sleep apnea got better when he stopped using Kratom. He went back on Kratom and the central sleep apnea occurred. He wanted to try to publish this. I mean, it's a case study, which means it's an N of one. There's one person that you're talking about. And you know what? It's kind of hard to get those published. So I'm mentioning it on the podcast because I get it. But he actually has a really good story. And anyone listening who's interested in publishing Matt's story should really think about it, because it's we've got the data points. He's got the polysomnogram data. So that's the sleep study data that we have. So I hope somebody reconsiders that. Do you have any questions for me or any other final comments about this experience that you would like to share with anyone who's listening?
If you're in my position, drinking or using a drug, and you think it's become a problem, really take a second look at yourself and try to reach out and get help. Because I was never willing to reach out and get help. I always told myself, like, no, I don't need rehab or AAA. I've had my wife, tell me, like, we need to stop and get help, and I just wouldn't do it. And, really look at yourself and see how it's affecting your life. Because after I stopped drinking, my anxiety, my depression went away. It would really look inside yourself and make sure that what you're doing is not hurting yourself more than you really realize.
Thank you. Are you doing AA now? Have you found that that's helpful for maintaining your sobriety, or are there any other programs that you're doing?
I'm raw dogging life right now. No, I didn't have any cravings for alcohol right after the incident. Actually, this past month, I've been really those have been really something I've been struggling with. But me and my wife have been handling it together, keeping each other on track. You never realize as an addict the excuses that you'll make for doing your choice drug or substance. It was our anniversary, and I was like, we can go to the bar, like, it's a celebration. And she's like, you're just making an excuse to drink. And I was like, I didn't quite realize that. But yeah, you'll make excuses to do your substance of choice without even realizing it.
Well, do you have any programs that are near you that you can consider? Because raw dogging it is one way to go, and I am here to support you. But I also think that if you notice that there's like an uptick and, you know what I mean, the further you distance yourself from a specific incident, sometimes it kind of falls to the wayside when those cravings come up. It sure would be nice to have someone who has kind of been in it and maybe is sort of an expert at navigating that. Those programs can sometimes be very helpful. I know they're not for everyone, but I'm curious if that's something that you've been contemplating.
It has been. The hospital left me with some resources to call, and I've been debating on getting a hold of somebody, especially with the school coming up and me going to have to cut back my work hours. It's something that I have been really contemplating. Maybe with your recommendation, I probably should.
I am going to beg you to. I really am. Anything that you can do to not feel like you're alone in this process, because everything that I have learned over the years in medicine is that it's very hard to just kind of go about it on your own. And especially if your wife is doing this with you, that could be, you guys have such a lovely love story, right? We want you around for another 80 years. You're a young kid. Let's get you moving in that direction so it's a sustainable thing, because it's so hard to do this on your own. So I'm going to encourage you to really think about it, because it seems like the success is pretty good, especially sometimes you do things and then you don't want to admit if you fall off the wagon, or, every day people can have relapses. And so if we're going to put one foot in front of the other and say, okay, today's a new day, let me get there, I think having a support network would be a really good idea. And it also may help you unpack maybe some of the reasons that kind of contributed to where you are today. Sometimes you can share your stories with others. I don't know. I know it's not always everyone's cup of tea, but I have known several people, a lot more common when you move to Los Angeles and live there for a bit, who have really found some comfort and peace in programs like that. So thank you for your advice to everyone. And for anyone listening out there, we did a very abbreviated kind of version of some of the other serious complications related to Kratom. And I have an article that's going to be posted on Substack And I will include some of the videos, Xavier, if you're comfortable with that, just so people can kind of understand the breathing pattern that got all of us so freaked out. Because I think it would be helpful for people to hear. Like, it was pretty scary, and I couldn't believe when your dad literally told me he's in an ambulance right now. And I was like, excuse me? I was so scared for him. He would have been devastated. So I know he's going to be seeing you this weekend. We were just talking about, like, could we pull this off the podcast or not? But we did it. We did it.
Yeah, and feel free to share those videos. I was actually going to mention that. Yeah, if you have the recordings of my dad, of me sleeping, yeah, feel free to add those on here, because I think that'd be really helpful for people to see and hear.
Thank you so much. Oh, I do have one final question for you that I thought of. Your dad did share with me that you did have a sleep study afterwards. And what's fascinating about your sleep study, because obviously that's you as a sober person with nothing else on board, your home sleep apnea test really showed some moderate sleep apnea. It wasn't anything really scary. So it was interesting because when he showed me that, I was like, wait a minute, that's not what I saw. That video was not a person with moderate sleep apnea. There is no way. And it just goes to show how substances can really cause you to get into a pickle with what they do to your breathing. Did they recommend any treatment, and how have you been doing on the treatment for sleep apnea?
I have a, oh goodness, what's that machine called?
An APAP or a CPAP?
A CPAP, yeah. I have a CPAP. I wear a full mouth mask because I breathe through my mouth. It is miserable. I do not like it. I'm pushing through with it. Everybody says you get used to it, but it really feels like you're drowning when you wear that thing.
And Xavier, do you have a sleep specialist in your life
actually,
seeing you?
I believe I got our 2 appointments mixed up. I believe I actually have his appointment at 5 and yours was at 4.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you go so you can get to that visit. But let me tell you, make sure that your sleep doctor knows that, because it may be as simple as a mask change, or maybe even just getting you into I think I would probably put you in the sleep lab. I'm not going to speak for your sleep doctor, but they may be able to do some tweaks and things to see if they can get you to that next level. And now that you were sober, the other option might be an oral appliance or some other type of treatment option. So make sure you discuss it with him, because the goal is improved quality of sleep. So if that's not happening, how can we make that happen for you? And I'm so glad that you're plugged in to seeing someone who has an expertise in this area. I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Alison.
Struggling with sleep? Dr. Kole is here to help. Whether you need a comprehensive sleep coaching program, suspect you have sleep apnea, or simply seeking a second opinion, she's available for consultation in New Jersey, New York, California, and Georgia, with more states coming soon. Schedule your free 10-minute review of services today to find out which visit is right for you at AskTheSleepMD.com and start your journey to better sleep with a trusted sleep expert.
Please be advised that the Sleep is My Waking Passion podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider for personalized guidance. For my full disclaimer, please visit AskTheSleepMD.com, and while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter. Sweet dreams and happy listening.